I've been waiting all day for this. Baron, my handsome man. Hi, human. Hey, babe. You ready? All right, let's roll it.
Amazing. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Soul Sense. And today we have the pleasure of chatting with a very inspirational human being in my life, and I know many other people's. So I'm just going to take a moment this morning and introduce Steve Nash. So Steve, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today, and for many reasons that I want to speak with you. But how are you doing today?
Thanks very much. I'm okay, thanks. I hope that as we were discussing in our preparation, that the coincidence that some of my gray hair is the same color as the background screen, that's not too distracting. Perhaps I should, and for next episode, I should artificially darken up. I don't know. So far, so good on this end.
It'd be a contrast, but I think we're all embracing this 3-month period now that we're going through with hair colors and no haircuts and all of that kind of thing with COVID.
Sure, and I prefer the natural gray that I've earned.
Yes, exactly. So one of the reasons, there's so many reasons that I want to speak to you. But first, I'd like you to maybe take a moment and explain for me, and then for everyone else who's watching and following along, what exactly you do right now at this time in your life, and then where your connection to military, youth work, all of that stuff comes in past pieces of your life.
Okay, thanks very much. I suppose I chose the picture in the background. It's one of my favorite pictures, and I think part of what I believe my role is in finding people that are on sort of one side of the bridge and trying to help them understand what is on the other side of the bridge in their life and help connect them to get across that bridge. Because I think one of the big challenges of life is understanding where you are. And sometimes we wait on this side of the bridge, hoping that something coincidental will make it easy or magical to cross over. And again, I love this photo, because the one behind me, because many of the things we want, we're not quite sure. And if we are sure, there's all kinds of risks and other things that would affect our ability to get across. So I think I'm, hopefully for some people, some of the time, I'm a relatively useful conduit for understanding where they are, perhaps on this side of the bridge, and where they'd like to go to, perhaps the other side of the bridge. And I can help them somehow in their life navigate the stressors and challenges of crossing that bridge.
It's really well put. And also, as you say it, I'm realizing so unique to every individual that I imagine you have already helped in their life and in your time getting from one side to the other and then moving forward. When you meet someone who, or where do you meet individuals that look to you for help or turn to you sort of in that mentor capacity?
Well, I suppose the biggest challenge is, in a sense, meeting them where they are. And sometimes we coincidentally cross paths with people. Sometimes it's more purposeful. I endeavor to maintain a network of sorts of probably 50 or 60 people in a circle, and some of them I see more often. If you consider kind of like planets in orbit around the sun, some people's orbits, I see them a lot. Some people's orbits, I see them not quite as much. And I also look at my role in that is not to keep them near me. Many of the people that I've worked with are now gone off to do whatever it is they want. Ironically, I see them far less, but now I get tune-ins every 3 to 6 months or once a year, depending on what they're doing. So my role in helping them on the bridge is, another analogy, I put them on my shoulders and push them away so that they can grab the next rung of what it is they want to do. And I find it fascinating because I'm built as a people person, right? I enjoy the company and people. I find human beings fascinating, and I find their sheer potential in a wide variety of things to be quite inspiring. And sometimes I just cross paths with people in a coincidence, and I'm not sure what they want, and they're not sure what they want. Sometimes it works out that we connect to do something. And by personality, I tell them I actually don't care what we do. I just care that we do something together. It doesn't matter to me. And I'm sure that it's more exciting for me if it's never been done, if it's impossible, if it's upside down, backwards, all those things by my personality and nature make it more interesting and potentially more valuable.
Now, does that have anything to do with your military background as well? That the more dangerous or fearful a situation is for someone, you're the human or the individual who kind of looks at that and sees it as a challenge and growth, and you know how to head into that. Like, I feel like you don't ever shy away from anything.
Well, I think like all of us, I shy away from the things I shy away from. I believe that we inherently use some words that we might understand or commonly is, I think we all have superpowers we're good at and we're proud to show off. We all have, from the archetypal Superman, we all have kryptonite. Things that we're afraid of, things that we hide, things that we're ashamed of, things that we won't go toward. And for me, I'm fascinated by helping people discover what their superpower and what their kryptonite is. And I do the same with myself. And I think I've discovered that at a certain point, your superpower can be your kryptonite. And at a certain point, your kryptonite can be your superpower. And part of that is related to my military service. But it's, I spent almost 25 years in the Canadian military. And in a way, it's neither good nor bad. It's neither better than someone else's nor worse. It's merely an individual experience over time. I was lucky enough to end up in some places with certain people doing certain things that had helped me, certainly challenged me, and it helped me learn some things about myself and about others and how to interact.
And that is, I'm sure those skills just are so transferable in every direction that you move with. What is the most impactful piece of work that you've had the opportunity to experience since leaving the military? And because you do a lot of resilience training, I guess, would that be the proper way of saying that, or how would you explain the trainings that you offer?
Well, I guess I offer a cross section of things, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm not actually that fussed about what I engage with, collaborate with people in or on. If it's never been done, it's more interesting to me. By personality, I prefer change. I prefer upside down and backwards, and I have one of my kryptonites is I have difficulty sustaining and maintaining if the same thing is going to happen today and tomorrow. At the same time, so in a cross section, I spent almost 9 years with a social welfare agency, including both as a volunteer, as an employee, frontline youth outreach worker, and then in some administrative and sort of supervisory roles, I suppose. And each of those engagements and others have sort of expanded my view of what the world is, what the people are, how they might be operating, where their challenges might be, and where I can sort of nudge in. If I can use some technology and change the background, right? The gray in my hair still might cause a problem. But in the background, this is now a picture from one of the wilderness trips I've done with youth at risk. So I've taken out since my retirement from the military more than 10 years ago, I went back to university for 3 years to get both a bachelor and master's in education. And I started a series of now 31 wilderness trips for small groups. At least 60% of those trips have been for at-risk youth. The picture in the background now just shows, some of the environment that we can go to do these things. I also work with tactical policing in particular. So this picture is now an event from a few years ago with a thing called the Tactical Leaders Course. And this course, like the wilderness trip, helps people understand those superpowers and kryptonites in some stressors that are both predictable, tend to affect most people in certain ways. And then I try my best to own and control some of the environment stressors so we can put everyone inside a level of safety so they can learn. Part of the challenge is for resiliency, and I guess that's what I'd call many of these things, it's difficult to practice resiliency if you're not feeling unresilient. The same way it's difficult to practice patience unless you're feeling impatient. And I think, some of your background in yoga is very good for me because I'm terrible at it. But I think yoga is the purposeful, willful placement of yourself in an uncomfortable position so that you can understand that feeling and that thought and work on different behaviors, biological and otherwise, to render that stressor less powerful. I might be reading yoga wrong because it's not a participant and a relative outsider, but that's kind of how I look at it.
Oh, I think it's a great explanation of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the background, in the picture I have in the background now, putting people and the operators, these are high-end, highly talented, highly skilled, physically fit, motivated Canadian law enforcement operators. I put them in a purposely stressful position in a way so then we can have a feeling and some thoughts to consider and learn from.
That's fantastic. And I think that the way that it is, even the way you explain that with yoga is, we get ourselves in a place that feels physically uncomfortable, maybe in that stretch or that position, and we have to figure out how to settle and accept being there for a few moments even, to just keep pushing through what that place is so we don't pull back from it. So I think that's it's resiliency in our body and our breath and accepting that, and it's a great way to look at it. Now, you say in those youth programs, so what you do and taking them out on these hikes is, and you and I have spoken about it before, there's very simple things that you're doing on these trips, and the nature itself obviously takes everything else into control for you and gives you sort of all of the lessons that you need, and you get to kind of build off of those.
No, for sure. So the wilderness trip, maybe I'll just go to another photo there in the background. I think what it does for us is it allows us to focus ourselves on one thing. So we all have our scattered lives. So when I gather people for a wilderness trip, we now have a singular focus. We spend time preparing and repacking and checking our gear and loading up food. And then we leave part of our life. We get out of the vehicle at a parking lot and we walk for up to 4 hours. And I prefer to take people out. So we leave at dusk and we walk for at least an hour in the dark. Because then I can start to focus them in a controlled environment, even though I don't control the nature. But predictive, it's going to, for many to most human beings, when it gets dark, we feel different. By evolutionary biology, humans are diurnal, daytime hunters, and we feel more at risk and less safe at night. So then there's a predictive stressor. And with youth, and I take out adult groups as well, I can then focus them because then they're listening, and then we can bring the group together because all of a sudden people remember that humans are pack animals, and that by gathering ourselves with good people who will keep us safe, we will tend to be more successful. And then on the trips, as we've discussed before, really we do basics. We gather our stuff and check it. We walk. We set up a camp. We eat. We go to sleep. We wake up in the morning. We eat. We tear down camp. We move. We set up camp. We eat. We sleep. And we kind of repeat a few basic processes. But especially for at-risk youth, I discovered, and I was a bit naive to this. Despite some of my travels in military service, I was naive to some of the stressors that people within a few kilometers of where I'm sitting right now might feel in the world. And I found it very ironic, and it became stressful on me to think that some Canadians in the 21st century don't live like other Canadians in the 21st century. And I'm a bit naive to that. But taking youth out where I can ensure that they are safe when they sleep. They have free access to quality, nutritious food in a quantity that they would value, and they help make it. Everyone helps with the dishes, right? And other things, basics become really important. And I think, in a way, going to the wilderness, which isn't that far away ever, the wilderness can remove some of the layers and the artificial shackles that we put on ourselves in what we might consider 21st century Canadian society, right? Other worries, other things that demand our attention, other things that cause us stress. Certainly when you're out in the wilderness and it's pouring rain, you need to have a shelter. And if everyone focuses for 5 or 10 minutes, then you'll suddenly become more dry. And in the wilderness, you can't flick on a light switch and have everything light for you. And although we take out flashlights for safety, my preference is to not use them. Because if we can relax a bit and let our eyes and our brain and our body adjust, we're relatively good in the dark. We're just not as good in the dark as we are in the day.
Right. It's so well put. Now, when you, in these groups of youth, do you find when you're working with at-risk youth, Steve, and you take them out to these types of situations, is it always participants that want to be there, or do you have a lot of resistance sometimes that you're already starting with, and you're already starting with the resistance of them wanting to go? And then what does that look like for those that are resistant on the other side, if they actually let themselves be in that place with you?
Well, it's an interesting cross section, and over the years, I've had a pretty good cross section of youth from maybe age 14 to 24, boys and girls, and folks that everyone's unique. I have had to go to Justice of the Peace to sign for a youth to become their legal guardian for the trip because they were in the foster care system. I've had youth resist in lots of different ways. But one of the things we talk about before we leave is on the trip, they need to respond to me because I'm legally and morally responsible for their safety. And for many of them, that's a difficult thing to put their safety into someone else's hands. I have had on the trip at least one youth who, it's sort of in the dark of night when it might have been snowing a little bit, they were going to run away because they're a runner. But all I could describe is we're 4 hours from the truck. You have no idea where you are. It's dark. Right? And in the background, coincidentally, in this case, there's a pack of coyotes who could be a risk if they discovered you were alone and panicked. But I said, why not just come over with us where we're going to have food and stay warm and dry and have a few laughs? But many to most of us, at least most of the time, want control. We want control. We want to have a say. And many of the youth and others I've encountered, some of their behavior that I might consider negative is merely a desire to have control. I want to have control of something. I want to be able to say yes. I want to be able to say no. I want to be able to leave right now. Those are just some of the real engagements and activities. And I'm very lucky, and for all the trips I bring out other adults from my network who often pay to come on the trip. I don't pay them because I pay for the youth to come on the trip. right? Although sometimes I have funding, usually the money comes from traditional excellence. And I ask adults to come and help me, and I ask them to pay money to come on a trip where they're helping. It's a totally bizarre business model, but the people that come out want to do it, and they care. And as soon as the youth see and sense that this person actually cares about them, things start to shift.
Hmm. It's interesting because, and you mentioned it at the beginning of that, you're taking individuals and human beings who have such intense trust issues, who in those situations have spent most of their life possibly feeling like they don't trust anyone. So I feel like it speaks a lot in your character to stand in that position. But then I do see how they could slowly, you would be the first person, that they might let in and trust. And it's in such a loving way, but it's also, it's kind of, like radical candor. You caring greatly about them and challenging them directly at the same time, which is really a beautiful thing. And then how big are the teams of people that go out with you? Because it isn't just you. You had mentioned that other people pay to go with you. What does that team look like?
So almost everything I do, although I can work with big groups, and I've presented to, sort of 1,500 or 1,800 people at one time, my preference is for smaller groups. And I use the idea of, the oldest form of education for human beings outside a family growth model. The only thing, that stretches back thousands of years is not the modern system we use, it's an apprenticeship, right? So the one to few, one to one, right, with trusted folks in there. So the average trip that I take out might be 7 people would be a big trip. 4 or 5 people would be a more standard trip.
Okay.
And that's including me.
Okay.
Because then, and depending on who's coming with me, whether they're youth at risk, whether they're adults, whether they have any experience, I may bring a functioning adult from my network, so it's one-to-one with those people. So that each person, each adult or youth has someone who's been on multiple trips with me before and kind of works in my network and as a high level of trust as a functioning citizen and adult, that they are available to that person literally 24 and at least for the duration of the trip. They're never more than a few feet away. They're never more than a I'm cold, I'm hungry statement away.
Wow. And that's just these trips are just one of the things that you do through traditional excellence. And I look forward to actually, when all of this craziness of the world lifts, to having an opportunity to be able to join you on one of those experiences for youth, but also for the chance to watch you in your element is a very interesting thing for me. But what other, so I kind of want to shift gears a bit, because traditional excellence, you're not just about the at-risk. One of the other things that you and I have talked about is compassion fatigue. And now if we kind of turn that to the workers of the at-risk youth or, that kind of thing, you do compassion fatigue and burnout right now is something that's happening intensely in the industry. And I'm very curious on your thoughts on that first.
No, for sure. And I kind of look at it, think human beings, right? We have a physical component or a biological physical component that we touch. And that's a real part of us. And then we also have, we might talk about mental health, or someone could say, you have your physical component, your mental, but I tend to break it into at least a few different parts. So we have, the oldest part of our brain, the brain stem, runs our physical body and it keeps us alive. But on top of that, our mammal brain, where much of where limbic system is where emotions are literally created. And, relatively few species have emotions like we do. But if you're a mammal, by definition, then you do have feelings. They're created in your middle brain, which is not as old as the brain stem, but relatively old. And then the newest part of our brain is our cognitive brain, where we think like humans. So if we if we're conversing in English as a language, if we understand that 2 plus 2 is 4 or 2 times 2 is 4, we're using the frontal cognitive brain. And these things are fully integrated. So what it means is when we talk about compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, stressors in around work, it would be totally normal and natural for someone to have injury in different ways. And I think the challenge of, if we have a physical injury, if you went into an emergency in a hospital and you were bleeding and you had a physical injury, they would not let you leave until that was resolved to their satisfaction. The challenge with what you think and you feel, and if we extend that to your spiritual sort of self and your social self and all these different things, they're invisible. And so you can hide them. One of the first things that humans do is hide their weakness. They hide their kryptonite or where they're hurting and pain. And we would be allowed to leave the hospital in most cases. When we think of what we're challenged with now in COVID-19, one of the biggest challenges, it is literally invisible unless you have an electron microscope. You don't know if it's there or not. So therefore, it creates a stressor. And it not only stresses our physical body, but we have a thought about it, especially around the numbers and the data and whether we think they're facts or not. And then we have the feelings about it. And interestingly, human beings can have thoughts about their feelings and feelings about their thoughts. And we could actually have a thought about our thought and a feeling about our feeling. And those feelings, because of the connection inside of us, can then have physical effect. You know, the easiest sort of chemical response to ongoing stressors is cortisol in our system, which is designed to save our lives when high stress, short duration events come on. But it is relatively toxic in our system over the long term for low end stressors. Right? So we have all these things kind of swirling around. But when we talk about compassion, fatigue, and vicarious trauma related, my previous military service tells me that post-traumatic stress is totally normal and natural, because if you have loving, caring people encounter terrible things, the most reasonable response would be an injury of some sort to the loving, caring person. So if you're a frontline nurse and you see people sick and dying, and you care about them, it's easy for me to understand that you could be hurt. And you can, and you can have compassion fatigue. You can be full. You can be full and you can be annoyed and you could even be pissed off. You could cry or laugh or yell, because those three things, crying, laughing, yelling, are merely the release of energy from your cognitive, emotional, physical system. And part of the challenge we have right now, part of the irony of the COVID-19 closure of many things is I couldn't run. I had the event that we talked about, Welcome to the Suck, a 3-day event to help people focused on first responders and like groups. But we couldn't do that training because they were already stressed out by the world. And I was just talking to some of these groups saying we should do this training. They're like, well, we're too busy right now. And I said, well, then as soon as it's over, we should do it. And they said, well, we don't think we can because we're going to be too busy recovering from it. Okay, so then if we never talk about something to gain awareness, to share theories and to share ideas, and if we never practice, then part of the challenge of resiliency is we don't get better. And although I don't know any more or less about resiliency than anyone, for me, surviving the situation is more about robustness and grit. To me, resiliency has the component of learning. And you might learn that if you have quality people in your life, they can help you be more resilient. And you might learn about yourself that if you, for example, can do yoga every morning for 20 minutes, you'll be okay. You might learn that every once in a while you just need to be away from people. Right? So that you can learn these things and create these habits and have, in a way, a safe place that you can go to, even if it's only in your imagination or in your feelings.
Right.
right? And part of what I try and do is, as I gather folks, is can we talk about some of these things? And I'm not that fussed about the thin edge of the wedge that gets you started, because any point can be a start point.
Right.
Then from there, we can talk around and we can share ideas, and we can even experience things. As I mentioned, that's one of the reasons I use wilderness trips. I also run fitness sessions for people. I teach martial arts. I teach use of force. I try to help people with personal and professional safety and security, right, to do some of these things as well. Because to me, they're all related. They're all related about understanding yourself and your environment, surviving, right, to the best of your ability, healing from any injuries or stressors, and succeeding towards sort of a contentment or happiness.
In any situation. I think that's
Exactly.
fantastic. What do you think is going to be one of the biggest pieces that people are left recovering from moving through COVID? Because every day we wake up, I started my third month today. It's been 3 months today since my physical studio space has been closed. I adapted and pivot. I don't really feel like I've been off, but what do you think the thing is that people are going to be fighting the most against when this kind of settles?
I think the ongoing stressor is what they're going to have to deal with most. And remember that the biologic body, your physical body, merely just responds. So if you're cold, at a certain point, your body starts to shiver. It is a normal, natural response to allow your body to warm up. It just responds on its own. But you can also train yourself to not shiver. And if you shiver enough, that could exhaust you, and it could affect your sleep, and it could affect all these other things. So whatever the stressor is, in a way, it doesn't matter. It's a stressor. And stressors are unique. And although COVID-19 might be common for many to most to all of us, how we view it and how we think about it and how we feel about it will change our responses and behaviors to it, which is very unique.
Right.
And I think that it's one of the things that I've been watching and considering in my closer network and a bigger network, and when I observe the world around me, whether it's through the news or personally, it is very unique. For some people, this is the best thing ever. As an example, some introverts are, because I was teaching at St. Lawrence College, and we were in classes and we were then online. Some of the people who were introverts were totally jazzed up by that. They were like, finally, the stressor of having to go to class with 40 students and see thousands of people a day is over. But other people, they love the human engagement. So their stressor is, I don't get to see the people that I like to see.
Right.
Because humans tend to want, at least two things. They want control of some portion of their life, and they want to be able to predict the future 5 or 10 seconds in advance. Something like COVID-19 challenges both of those.
Yeah.
Because although I could go to certain stores at a certain time, I don't get to do whatever I want there. I don't get to get as close as I want, or I don't get to reach over someone to grab a book. And at the same time, my brain might be worrying about, well, what if something different happens tomorrow? The irony of that challenge of a new normal, and we've talked about this recently, is the world is always changing. But part of our brain and our body has to ignore it, because it would tend to stress us. The scientists might tell you, NASA scientists might suggest that the Earth is hurtling through space at roughly 26,000 miles an hour, turning on its axis, being pulled by the moon, and circling around the sun. But for most of us, most of the time, we don't perceive that. Therefore, we have a low stressor from it. But it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
It's funny, watching people sort of move into COVID. We talk about normal, and how it was such a great thing for some people and not for others. I think one of the reasons that I found it to be such a beautiful, kind of a gift, as odd as that may sound, there's always opportunity in crisis. And I think that this was just a big wake up call for me personally to all of the areas that I didn't need to, all of the things that weren't necessary in my life. And I think a lot of people either rolled into accepting that or really fought that resistance of normal, and looking to new normal, accepting that it's still going to change every day. I don't think we're going back to the old model of anything. Life is still happening right now. And I think that resistance people have been feeling is part of what's been holding them back from accepting that things are changing. We tend to get so attached to the idea of how we want things to be because we can't control it.
Oh, for sure. And we humans love habits. Yeah. Humans love habits. This is what I do at this time. This is what I do at that time. And one of the advantages of some of the training I do with the wilderness trips is I have to take away some habits. And they have to be replaced. In my story earlier, if it's pouring rain and we're on we've stopped at a camp and it is pouring rain, I'm going to focus everyone in the group into helping get that first tarp. Because I don't bring tents out. We use austere shelter, which I believe is equally safe. And if we put some effort into it, is equally comfortable. Right? But if you're distracted by something that is unimportant, then maybe you're soaking wet and you don't get something. One of the biggest challenges in our lives is what's important and what's not. If your cell phone buzzes right now, is it important for you to look, or is it unimportant? Is it more important for you to eat a carrot right now, or is it more important for you to check your cell phone? I don't know. Right. But we spend a lot of our time trying to think about what is important right now, how are we feeling, what are we thinking, what's our body physically, the physical state, and then what are we going to do by behavior or performance? Right? What are we going to do? How are we going to take action or not? All these things are swirling. And you mentioned, COVID-19, maybe it's good for people, but if you had a loved one die or you feel sick, your personal experience, which is important, might cause you to argue. Having been in certain places in the world, I spent 7 months in Somalia as a young officer, but the COVID-19 outbreak in Somalia, the World Health Organization has the whole world locked down. But there are other things there that it might kill you first. Right? Likewise, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo right now, they have an Ebola outbreak. And Ebola kills up to 1 in 2 people that get it. Statistically, COVID-19 kills a very small percentage of people that encounter it. Right. And also in the Democratic Republic of Congo, they can't get out to take care of the Ebola because the roads are shut down from COVID-19, right? And meanwhile, workers can't get to children who are dying from the measles. And we have a shot for the measles, which we came up with, decades ago. But we can't deliver it because we're responding to something. And it's this challenge of what should we respond to, how, what should we ignore, what should we really dig into, right? And it's occurring all the time. And part of human beings as they exist now, part of the evolutionary human being is built to live 10 or 15,000 years ago. And as we continue to evolve, the physical body, the physical development has a hard time catching up to other things that change rapidly. Shape or type of your cell phone, speed of something, or electric vehicles. Our bodies are not built for something yet.
Right. What is, as someone who, sort of takes human beings in and watches what it is we do and how we move and sort of what makes us tick, what has it been like watching people in COVID? Like, how has that been for you, and how has it surprised you how human beings have reacted? Or if we were to just look at Kingston, has it surprised you how people have reacted in this pandemic?
Well, I guess I try to accept in many, if not most cases, the full spectrum of human behavior. Because the only person I own and control is me, right? And I think if you have a hard enough time understanding who I am and what I should do, owning my own behaviors, thoughts, feelings, I have a hard enough time with that. And then I love to observe people, and I try my best to not judge them, although we do by nature. Human beings are biased, discriminatory, and judgy by nature. I think that various research would suggest that those things, although we might give them a negative connotation in the 21st century society, they've been built into us as a mechanism. But they're not as sophisticated as some of the modern world. So if I think someone is overreacting to COVID-19, one, who am I to declare someone else's behavior as something or not?
Yeah.
And maybe I just don't know their context. I think one of the most important things I've learned over the years is the idea of asking the question, what don't you know? If I see someone who I think is overreacting or underreacting, well, there's likely something I don't know. What don't I know about their situation? What don't I know about their environment? What don't I know about their life? Right? But I worry, and sometimes I'm disappointed unfairly in people's behavior, because human beings tend to be very kind when there's lots to go around, and sometimes we act selfishly, not even when there's actually a shortage, but when we perceive or imagine a shortage. And a month and a half or 2 months ago, the run on toilet paper kind of proved that.
Right.
I wasn't quite sure of the connection, but when in doubt, sometimes people gather around it.
Right.
We gather things, and then during COVID-19, there's also people and companies making a lot of money. And in a way, that's neither good nor bad. I might have a view and opinion, or you might have a view and opinion. People and organizations and corporations and companies have to make decisions on how they're going to respond, and in fact, how they're going to survive.
Right. It's one of the things I find that I agree with you wholeheartedly. Controlling my own self right now is it's a new story every day, and then
in a way, that's kind of just like life yoga.
It's just life yoga. Every day is a new day. And I say to people, I have my highs and lows. I have moments where moving through it, everything makes sense. And I have moments where I'm questioning everything. But the only thing I can control is me. And so even when we do have those judgments of other people, or those frustrations for people doing things one way or another, we have to just remind ourselves quickly that we can only control us. And that's controlling our environment at home, how we bring things into our house, how we interact with people. I am an individual who goes out when I'm shopping with a mask and gloves on, for me to protect myself, but to also protect others, But when people see me with a mask on, they may not think that it's because I'm trying to protect them. So it is an interesting thing. And one thing I have to remind myself every day is that I'm working with a new version of me every day in the world that we're in
exactly.
right now.
If you think of, the changes inside of us are at least as fascinating as the changes are in the world around us.
Yeah.
By how our body works, when we started this conversation, 40 minutes ago, we were literally different people, because in the 40 minutes, both of us have had thousands of new cells generate in our body. We have literally changed. We have breathed in different things. We have breathed out. We've had thousands of thoughts go through our minds. We've had feelings go through. The chemistry and electrical impulses in our body are changing as we digest food, and as our sleep-wake cycle continues. Like, all those things are live. But we are able to ignore most of them most of the time. And when we can ignore things, then we might pretend that they don't exist. But you're very right in that we're always, I think, a Greek philosopher about 3,000 years ago said you can never put your hand in the stream in the same place. Because even if you think you are stationary, everything's moving around you. And physically, biologically, we are inherently different than we were a second ago. And now we're different. And now we're different. Now we're
I love that. Steve, is there anything else that you would say, suggest, recommend to someone who's maybe having a bit of a difficult time with mental health in COVID, or just with mental health in general? Because I think, sometimes with people right now, especially 3 months in, we're either thriving, we figured out how to survive and we're thriving through this, or I think for some people, it's actually on a decline. The other way, we're 3 months in, there really might not be an end in sight right now with the way things are. So what would you say to someone who might be struggling with mental health right now?
I think a few ideas, and these are ideas that I see and I try and use in a wide cross-section of training, whether I'm teaching martial arts or use of force, or whether in the wilderness, right? The first one is from the relatively well-known story of Goldilocks. The Goldilocks story suggests that things can be too much or not enough, and what you're trying to do is achieve the just right. The just right is fleeting, but there is too early and too late. There is too hot and too cold. There is too much worry and not enough worry. The challenge is, can you get to the just right? Can you get to the balance? And you can expect that things will go back and forth, right? And even if in the stressor of what we feel, they're like stressors, right? Of energy going up and down, you vibrate. But if we look at our heart rate, and we talked about this before, your heart rate is chaos, then calm, chaos, then calm, chaos, then calm. That's a sinus rhythm for a heart rate. So it shows that if you have too much chaos, you're fibrillating and you need to be defibrillated. Your heart needs to be stopped and started again because there's too much stress, too much chaos. At the same time, your heart rate suggests if you are flatline, you're already dead. So we should expect a variance of stressor, calm, stressor, calm. And then to try and find that balance in your life is potentially the most difficult thing. Because when you're under stress, you tend to feel stressed. When you're calm, you tend to feel calm. So that's the first one, that idea of balance and how these things move back and forth. It's hot, then it's cold. You're tired, then you're rested. You're angry, then you're not angry. You're content, then you're sad.
It's a perfect
I might
balance.
suggest, so balance, Goldilocks.
Right.
The next one I might suggest is, when in doubt, breathe. Breathing, the biologic function of breathing is one of the few things that we can do both autonomically, your body does it on its own, and we can control it. But research suggests the one thing that we can control that can change our mood, our level of stress, excitement, etc., is by breathing. So that breathing, remember, we like to predict the future and we like to control things. So if you can breathe, control your breathing, you can predict the future. Can you hear my grandson in the background?
I can.
That's an added bonus.
He sounds amazing. He's ready.
He's calling for me right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, continuing on these things that you can do, I've been trying to read over the last, I read as much as I can in a wide variety of things, but research from neurologists, like brain doctors, over the last 35 or 40 years have come up with a list of 6 things that you can do to help your body and your brain recover. And remember that most smart people around the biology of humans, we don't need to sleep for our physical body. We need to sleep for our brain. right? The same way that when you turn your cell phone or your computer all the way off, it will defragment the hard drive and it'll reorder things and it'll get itself organized. Your brain does the same thing. So the 6 key components from this, this long-term study for physical and neurological healing is, number 1 is sleep. Sleep. Sleep is number 1.
Okay.
Sleep. And we live in a society where people are anxious and they want to do different things and I can get more done. Well, in a way, it doesn't matter. What matters is survival and contentment. Everything else is sort of intermixed there, but if you don't survive, nothing matters. And if you're working really hard and you're beavering away and working 23 hours a day and get a promotion, but you're unhappy or you're destroying your physical self, it's probably not worth it. So sleep is number 1. Number 2 and number 3, closely connected, are hydration and nutrition. We literally are what we eat because the human body is a recycling system. Whatever we put in, it gets broken down, the useful parts get distributed in your body, and the rest gets evacuated. So you have sleep, nutrition, and hydration. Next in that list is cardiovascular activity. You need to move around. Your body only heals what you use. So if you don't use something, your body brain says, we're not using it, it's not important, therefore I won't fix it, and I won't make it stronger, I won't heal it. If you want it to be powerful and useful, you need to use it. So cardiovascular activity. Enough so that your heart rate gets up, so that your body has to know. And one of the challenges that I've seen with people with anxiety has many of the features of being physically active. I went for a run this morning and it was not good. I was out running and I heard someone and they were making these noises and I was like, oh, that's terrible. I feel bad for them. But then I looked around and I was alone.
Right.
But the stressor's on me, right? I could have seen it. It felt like anxiety. I was having a hard time breathing, right? I had to control myself. My systems were maximizing. All these things were happening. But if I don't do it, my system might not fix itself or work.
Right.
The next one's in that list. Number 5, I think, is really important, is pro-social engagement. In the world we live in with billions of people, we don't always have the choice of who we're around and who we're with. But I believe whenever you have choice, surround yourself with the best people that you can possibly find. People that you care about and people that care about you. Because then when you're feeling weak, they can help take care of you. And when you're feeling strong and they're weak, you can take care of them, because humans are, by evolutionary biology, pack animals. It's not that we're not individually important or can't do great things individually. I suggest we merely tend to maximize in groups, small or large. And then the last part of this group of 6 from these studies is the idea of challenge. Challenge yourself. Right? Do something new. Do something you're not good at. Look at and experience and feel some of your kryptonite. Right? Just do it. It will be okay. Try not to have catastrophic failure. But human beings, by definition, only learn through conflict, failure, mistakes, chaos, and stressors. So ironically, in the world we live in right now, we're learning a lot. It's just that the learning is constant, so it's stressing us out. And we're seeking a break in the learning cycle so that we can better bring that into our body and ourselves. We're not used to a 3-month constant learning cycle, which is what COVID-19 for many people has become. And adjusting to a new thing every day, or wondering what the new stats are going to be this morning. Right? It's an ongoing stressor, but it is a form of learning. And at the end of this, however it ends or changes, those of us that have survived it will tend to be better at dealing with that. We might not be better at dealing with something else, volcanoes or earthquakes, but we could be better at dealing with something like this.
Right. And I think that, in saying that this is learning, I think that's also the important piece. And for anyone, listening or anyone that we encounter is slowing down enough to get the lesson also, because it's an unfortunate thing if we're moving through this whole process and not allowing ourselves to learn anything in that
for
stress
sure,
up.
for sure. And it's a challenge. So you need a certain level of stress to learn, but too much stress reduces the learning,
Right.
especially with the ongoing cortisol in your system. It fights it. So think of learning like a vibration. It's stressful, and then I learn, but I really bring the lessons into my brain and my body when things calm down a bit.
Right.
The same neurologists, or neuroscientists who've looked at the 6 features I mentioned before, suggest that you only learn when you sleep. If you read a book and you did something in class today or doing yoga today, they suggest you need at least a sleep cycle for it to be downloaded into your brain, into your long-term memory. As certain things only occur when we go to sleep, especially in the REM cycle, right? The rapid eye movement cycle. Certain things happen. Your body detoxifies, your brain sort of defragments itself and tries to put some sense to experiences and thoughts that you might have had during the day. Yeah.
Wonderful. Steve, it's always a pleasure. I could talk to you for days.
Say that now, but
you say that now. By day 3, you'd be like, could you please give me a minute? No, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. For anyone looking to contact or reach out to you, for trainings that they may want to bring you on board for, how can people find you if they're looking?
Well, I guess they can certainly come through you as a conduit, right? Because you have my contact.
Yeah,
the Traditional Excellence Human Performance is my little company, right? And I think it's on my logo here, and I could actually, if I wanted, let's see if I could do that, and I can make it bigger in the background there, kind of like a big bold poster. Yeah, and so I have a website. It's not particularly good because it's not my forte and not my focus. I have a presence with Traditional Excellence on Facebook, which again, it's not my forte, but I try and put some reasonable effort into it, some small level. I'm in LinkedIn. My email is info@traditionalexcellence.com. Right? And I'm always interested in what people want to do and what they want to think about and how they want to develop. And me, most of the time, there's no barrier or limit on what it is. I don't tend to shy away from things that have never happened before, or upside down, backwards on. Right? So sometimes people are trying to describe something, and all I merely suggest we go to a start point. Think of your experience as a professional teacher in yoga, right? Sometimes you just got to get to a pose. And when I teach martial arts, some people tell me, well, this is where you have to start. I'm like, well, no, all you have to do is find a start point. And sometimes the start point has to be where the other person is. And that's why I put the bridge photo up again. We're each somewhere trying to get somewhere. So some of this is, can you meet someone where they are and perceive where they are and help them understand where they are? If you don't know that you're in Kingston and you get to the 401, it's hard for you to understand how to get to Toronto and Montreal. But if you know that you're in Kingston, then you know a relative positioning for those different things. But yeah, so.
Thank you for meeting me where I am on my journey.
Well, ironically, the digital link allows us to meet just about anywhere where they might be.
Right.
Might not be.
I will be in touch soon. Again, Steve, thank you so much. It is always a pleasure. And have a wonderful, rest of your day, whatever that entails for you. The little guy here in the background, I'm sure is pretty excited to see you.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. It's always a pleasure to chat and to collaborate, and I look forward to next opportunities. Thanks very much. Stay safe.
As do I. You too. Bye. So again, today, thank you. One of my biggest inspirations personally is someone that whose work I aspire to on endless levels in capacities that I'm not really sure I even quite understand yet. So big thank you to Steve Nash for joining us today. And I'm looking forward to the next time that we can land with him, and perhaps it will be in more of a one-on-one physical setting, maybe looking at some of these survival skills that he shares with everyone. So thank you for stepping in at Soul Sense. I hope everyone has an amazing day, and we will talk to you soon. You'll vogue your way out of it. Dun-dun-dun.